Orcas, revered for their intelligence, sometimes exhibit startling aggression when provoked. These narratives explore the dramatic encounters between humans and these powerful creatures. From attacks on boats to confrontations in open waters, each story unveils the desperate human attempts to survive and comprehend the orca's sudden hostility, highlighting the delicate balance between nature and humanity. In 2001, the atmosphere in Ocean Majesty Marine Park was charged with palpable excitement, as if the entire town was pulsating with the thrum of an electric current. This year was marked by clear skies and sunny days, setting the perfect backdrop for the season's most awaited event. Today was no ordinary day at the park. It was the debut of Titan, a colossal orca recently transferred from another marine reserve specifically for this event. Titan's reputation preceded him. He was known for his impressive size, abilities, and unpredictable nature, which only heightened the anticipation and suspense surrounding his performance. This combination of factors promised an unforgettable show, drawing an eager crowd all set to witness Titan's majestic prowess in action. Parents and children were ready with cameras to capture the moment. The sun shone brightly and cast shimmering reflections in the pool. The day was perfect for a show. Sarah Jennings was a mixture of excitement and nervousness as she prepared for the show backstage. She spent weeks with Titan to learn his quirks and gain his trust. She wore a bright blue wetsuit that matched her determination. The show started as the clock struck 3. Sarah entered the arena confidently, waving at the cheering audience. Titan jumped gracefully out of the water after she gave the signal. The audience erupted in applause. Sarah sat on Titan's back and they performed stunning dives. As the show neared its conclusion, the energy level changed. The cheers of the crowd grew louder and the clapping increased. Titan, a sensitive orca, began to become agitated. He ignored Sarah's orders. Sarah touched his snout lightly as a gesture of comfort between them. The noise continued to grow. The speakers blared music and children screamed with delight. Titan, overwhelmed by the situation, acted out. He grabbed Sarah's foot in his mouth during a routine dive. This was not done out of aggression, but rather confusion and fear. The audience gasped in confusion, not knowing if it was part of the performance. Sarah struggled with her release and she called out to the other trainers in her heartbeat. Titan dove, pulling her underwater swiftly. Sarah tried to stay calm underwater. She knew panicking would make the situation worse. She gently stroked Titan's head to reconnect with her gentle giant. Above them was a flurry of activity as her team desperately tried to solve the crisis. Sarah was under pressure underwater as she struggled to resist Titan's grip. Only her training as an orca trainer kept Sarah calm in this dangerous situation. She knew that sudden movements might trigger a hostile response from an already distressed orca. Above the water, the crowd was in a quiet silence. The excitement of earlier had been replaced with a cloud of worry. Parents covered their kids' eyes and whispers about worry spread throughout the stands. Staff at the marine park worked tirelessly to get Titan to let Sarah go. They offered him food and threw his favorite toys to get his attention. Submerged and out of oxygen, Sarah realized she had to conserve her energy and oxygen. She resisted the urge to fight and stayed as still as possible, trying to calm herself and the orca holding her. She was desperate for answers as her air was rapidly running out. The control room decided to dim the music and calm the crowd using the announcer. Titan's agitation began to decrease as the environment changed. Once frenzied with confusion, his eyes began to return to normal. Michael Andrews, the trainer in charge, appeared to be urgently directing the rescue operation. His voice was steady as he issued commands, and he carried the weight and urgency of the situation with determination, focused on saving his friend and colleague. The tension increased as the minutes passed. Sarah's lungs were screaming for air and Titan's grip began to loosen as Sarah's consciousness started to fade. It was almost tangible that his behavior had changed, as if suddenly he realized he wasn't in danger. With a last-ditch effort, the trainers diverted Titan long enough to allow Sarah to escape. The emergency response team was there to help her as she gasped for air. As the crowd watched her surface, they erupted in applause, relief, and cries. Sarah was taken to a medical station and the show abruptly ended. The park released statements to the media and the shocked audience explaining that the strange behavior was a reaction to the loud noises and promising to review their animal care protocol. Titan was then closely monitored and given extra training in the weeks following. to help him better adapt to the stress of performing. Sarah took a short leave to reflect on her traumatic experience. She returned to the show with a renewed dedication to animal welfare and a desire to change how the shows are conducted to prevent incidents like this. Marine park staff learned an essential lesson about crowd control and animal behavior. They revised their guidelines to prioritize the comfort and safety of the animals and the humans who handle them. Titan performed under stricter conditions, and all staff were better informed about the signs of animal distress. The tragic event between Sarah and Titan forged a bond based on mutual respect and shared experience. It could have been much different. Ocean Majesty Marine Park staff and community will always remember the day that the line was drawn between safety and entertainment in the Orca pool. Beneath a dark, velvety sky sprinkled with stars, a group of eager tourists gathered at the dock, ready to embark on the Sea Whisperer. Nestled in the tranquil waters of the San Juan Islands, the night was shaping up to be perfect for a whale-watching cruise. With a gentle breeze tempering the crisp air, the conditions were ideal. The tourists, buzzing with anticipation, were there hoping to glimpse the majestic and elusive orcas known to frequent these waters. Their excitement was palpable, each person clad in anticipation of meeting these magnificent creatures in their natural habitat. James Bennett, an experienced sailor who has spent years in this area, gave a safety briefing and explained what to expect on the cruise. Emily Jackson, an eager young biologist who wanted to see orcas in the wild, and Tom Sanders, a photographer looking to get the perfect shot, were among the tourists. The Sea Whisperer silently glided over the calm ocean as the clock struck midnight. Warm jackets wrapped around the tourists. They anxiously scanned the dark waters. The air was crisp, and all that could be heard were distant marine life and the lapping water on the hull. A ripple appeared in the water. The dorsal slicing gracefully and strength through the water surface was a fin. The Midnight Hunter was a solitary large orca well known by locals because of its mysterious and striking nature. Tom's camera snapped rapidly as Emily's eyes widened in amazement. The orca was swimming alongside the boat, its sleek black body shining in the moonlight. Everything seemed magical for a brief moment. The atmosphere changed suddenly and without warning. The Midnight Hunter dived under the boat and a powerful jolt shook the Sea Whisperer. The tourists were frightened by a loud scraping noise. They grabbed onto anything they could. Everyone was urged to remain calm as Captain Bennett's voice cut through the noise, instructing them to move towards the life jackets. The Orca had collided with the boat, resulting in a visible crack in the hull through which water began to seep into the ship. As water pooled at their feet, panic set in. When the boat tilted dangerously, Emily, Tom, and the other tourists raced towards the life jackets to help each other. The passengers' faces were cast in eerie shadows as the lights flickered. Captain Bennett and his team quickly deployed life rafts as the situation escalated. Speaking calmly and urgently, he emphasized the need to evacuate everyone before it was too late. Meanwhile, Emily, confused, noticed the Midnight Hunter circling back, its fins slicing through the water. She exclaimed that it had returned, pointing towards the shadow in the water. Caught between his desire to document the incredible event and his fear, Tom grabbed his digital camera. He voiced his confusion about why the orca was chasing them, his question barely audible above the sounds of rushing water and creaking metal. Emily assisted an elderly couple to enter the first life raft as it was lowered into the water. Quickly ushering everyone, Captain Bennett directed more people onto the rafts, shouting for them to head his way. Meanwhile, the crew diligently counted heads to ensure no one was forgotten in the hurried evacuation. Midnight Hunter passed again, its massive body visible in the moonlight. Orcas are known to be a fearsome predator. Captain Bennett took one last look around as the passengers climbed into the rafts, his expression a blend of concern and composure. He indicated the urgency of moving away from the unsafe vessel. As they slowly left the Sea Whisperer sinking, the small convoy of rafts felt their hearts race. The orca's breath echoed in the darkness, reminding them of their narrow escape. The night was not over yet, and they were safe. The San Juan Islands, looming as the life rafts floated gently in the dark waters, offered a faint promise that safety was near. With his eyes on the horizon, Captain Bennett steered the leading raft. The cold wind and the adrenaline from the ordeal kept the survivors alert. Emily wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, her mind racing with questions about the aggressive behavior of the orca known as Midnight Hunter. She expressed her thoughts quietly, noting that orcas don't often attack boats. Sitting next to her, Tom listened intently, his camera now tucked away in a drawer, rendered useless without any light. Tom nodded with a somber expression. There's got to be a good reason. He speculated about trying to make sense of it. The other tourists were both shocked and relieved. Among them was Sarah Lee, a retired teacher who had long dreamed of seeing an orca in person. She expressed her disbelief to the person beside her, reflecting on the unexpected nature of the encounter. They were enveloped in darkness, with only the flickering emergency lights on their vests and the light from the moon. The sea sounds seemed to be amplified, with each wave crashing into the rafts increasing their anxiety. A loud splash suddenly echoed throughout the night, and several passengers gasped. The Midnight Hunter briefly surfaced, its massive body visible in the moonlight. It then disappeared. Orcas were still nearby, reminding them that their situation was precarious. Captain Bennett remained calm and spoke reassuringly to the passengers, assuring them of their proximity to shore and imminent safety. Despite his calming words, his eyes constantly scanned the water around them, alert to any further dangers. As they neared the islands, a faint siren sound grew louder. Rescue was on the way. The group felt a sense of relief, and the conversation shifted from stories of fear to survival. The group spoke about the crew's swift actions, the captain's steady guidance, and their reactions to the crisis. The Coast Guard arrived and searched the darkness of the sea with powerful beams. The Coast Guard safely transferred the terrified passengers from the rafts into their vessel. As each person boarded, the relief was palpable. They were given warm blankets and hot beverages. Once everyone was safe and accounted for, Captain Bennett briefed the Coast Guard about the incident. He mentioned the necessity of informing the authorities, suggesting that the aggressive behavior might be due to a problem with the orca, or could simply be a fluke. He emphasized the importance of understanding exactly what had happened. The survivors gathered together on the shore as the sunrise painted the sky with oranges and pinks. They were all wrapped in blankets. They were bonded in unexpected ways by the ordeal. Emily and Tom exchanged contact information and promised to share photos and messages. Sarah Lee smiled faintly despite her night of terror. As the news about the Midnight Hunter spread, it sparked debates in the local and national media. These debates focused on wildlife interaction and the safety associated with such tours. As investigations were underway, night cruises were temporarily suspended. Emily, Tom, and the other survivors carried the vivid memory of that fateful night. The sight of the orca's dorsal fins slicing through the moonlit waters haunted their dreams for many years. Midnight Hunter, the lone orca navigating the depths of the San Juan Islands, continued to swim, driven by mysterious impulses that remained unfathomable to those who had witnessed its unsettling behavior. A tribe lived off the coasts of North Island in New Zealand. The waters raged against the cliffs and the beaches, but their lives were closely linked to the sea. The tribe revered a mighty orca called Kaitiaki. It was seen as a spirit of protection and strength. They believed the sea was generous and would reign in peace as long as Kaitiaki lived there. The tranquility of the area was disturbed one fateful morning when, unbeknownst to Kaitiaki, a group unaware of his presence accidentally caught and killed a young calf orca. The calf in question was not any ordinary orca, but Kaitiaki's offspring, whom the ancient protector had been teaching roots and rituals to their kind. The fishermen did not notice the calf's death and thought nothing of it, but Kaitiaki was deeply affected by this incident. After losing its calf, Kaitiaki's protective nature changed into rage and revenge. Swimmers near the shore began reporting unsettling encounters. Boats were damaged mysteriously, and their hulls were struck violently from below. This sent shivers down the spines of those who experienced the orca's anger. The tribe became increasingly afraid of the water, their lifeblood. The elders gathered and whispered about a curse they had received for the death of Kaitiaki's calf. They turned to Tama, their young shaman who was known for his wisdom and connection with the spirit world. Tama was aware of the daunting task he had before him. He needed to bridge the divide between the grieving sea guardian and the fear-filled villages. To do so, he set out on a quest to learn the language spoken by orcas, consulting ancient texts and meditating near the shoreline, where he heard Kaitiaki's mournful cries in the crashing waves. Realizing the severity of the situation, Tama performed a ceremony to appeal to Kaitiaki. He made an offering out of woven reeds, shells, and other symbols of his tribe's life and connection, and set it free in the water where the calf died. The gesture was intended to show remorse and ask for forgiveness. Tribal members on the shore were watching. The sea seemed to churn with anticipation as Kaitiaki approached the massive offering. Orcas circled the floating tribute, their movement suggesting an understanding of its profound significance. At that moment, the ocean appeared to hold its breath, and Tama, witnessing this solemn ritual, was filled with a complex blend of fear and hope, sensing the gravity of the ceremony unfolding before him. As night fell, Tama waited by the water, his eyes fixed on where the stars and the sea met, hoping for a sign. The tribe also waited, occasionally catching a glimpse of Tama's silhouette on the moonlit shore, and wondering if the young shaman could turn their fortune around. Over the day, the calmness of the ocean grew. The water around the memorial became almost eerily calm as the violent swells diminished. Kaitiaki's massive body glided close to shore, causing the water's surface to ripple violently. Tama stood unwaveringly on the shoreline and watched the orca circle the area where the offering floated. The tribe held their breath and waited for the orca's next move. Kaitiaki gently nudged the woven gift with its snout, pushing it toward the beach. The orca made a mournful, long sound as the bundle washed into Tama's foot. Tama considered this an acknowledgement of their apology and a sign that they would communicate and reconcile. Tama, energized by the response, took a further step into the surf. He raised his arms and voice in a chant calling for peace and understanding with the tribe's guardian spirits. Kaitiaki reacted by swimming parallel to the shore. Its movements were slow and deliberate in stark contrast to its previous aggression. The atmosphere changed from tension to tentative relief as dawn broke. Tama and the elders met at first light to discuss the implications of the events that occurred during the night. They agreed that they must take proactive steps to prevent similar tragedies and respect orcas in the future by closely monitoring fishing activities and educating younger generations about Kaitiaki. In the following weeks, the tribe began to change its relationship with the sea. The tribe changed their fishing routes to avoid orca tracks and stationed lookouts to monitor marine life in the area. Tama and a select few of his followers began to make regular offerings to Kaitiaki. This ritual ensured respect and coexistence. As the months passed, the tale of the night Kaitiaki received the tribe's apologies became an essential part of tribal legend. Tama became a respected tribal leader. He was revered for restoring peace and helping bridge the spiritual connection between tribes and orcas. Kaitiaki became a protector, not a feared ghost. The attack stopped. The tribe's bond with their sea guardian was strengthened by mutual respect and understanding. Kaitiaki, the ancient orca, once again guarded the waters and ensured the safety and abundance of the tribe that had learned to respond to their guardian's calls. The tribe's newfound harmony is a testament to their resilience and deep respect for nature. The Ocean Explorer, a research vessel, glided across the calm waters of Monterey Bay in California. Its mission was to map the underwater mountains using advanced sonar technologies. On board the ship was a dedicated team of scientists, including marine scientist Dr. Laura Evans and geoscientist Dr. Mark Thompson. A gentle breeze was stirring the surface of a bright blue sea. The Ocean Explorer had cutting-edge technology to reach the deepest recesses of oceans and reveal secrets that have been hidden for millennia. The data began to flow in as the sonar sent out its regular pings. This created a picture of an underwater landscape on the monitors inside the ship's laboratory. Laura and Mark analyzed the images to find promising geological formations. Unknown to the crew, their sonar waves reached much deeper than the mountains intended to be mapped. The sound waves in the abyssal deeps disturbed an enormous deep-sea orca, known as the abyssal phantasm, to those who have seen it. The orca was well adapted to the ocean's dark, crushing depths and its environment's immense pressures. It interpreted the unfamiliar sonar pings as a potential threat, prompting a defensive response. Roused from its hiding place, the massive creature began a swift and determined ascent toward the surface, its movements reflecting urgency and intent. The team was satisfied with their day's work, feeling a sense of accomplishment. However, this tranquility was abruptly shattered when the vessel began to shake violently. An unknown force had collided with its hull, jolting everyone on board. As a large, ominous shadow appeared on the sonar screen, the screens flickered, heightening the tension and uncertainty among the crew. Laura grabbed a table for support. Mark ran to the window and peered out at the water. The outline of the Orca was visible, with its black and whitish pattern against the deep blue sea. Perceiving the vessel as an intruder in its territory, the Orca initiated a series of aggressive maneuvers. It rammed the ship again, this time with even greater force, resulting in a visible dent in its hull. This assertive behavior underscored the Orca's territorial instincts and capacity to defend its domain. On the bridge, chaos broke out. James Reed, the captain, yelled orders at his crew, telling them to stabilize the ship and assess the damages, given her knowledge of orcas and their behavior. Laura understood that the creature mistook their sonar as a challenge. She told her captain that she needed to turn off the sonar immediately. This could be irritating the Orca. Captain Reed shut off the sonar without hesitation. The ship was silent. Only the creaking metal and the waves lapping against the hull were audible. It appeared briefly that the Orca was retreating as the shadow disappeared from the sonar display. The crew breathed a sigh of relief as they hoped the Orca had calmed down. Their relief, however, was not long-lasting. Abyssal Phantasm, curious and still in a rage, smashed into the ship with a huge splash. The impact sent an ocean wave which sprayed cold seawater on the Ocean Explorer's deck. Laura and Mark looked at each other with deep concern. The Orca's movements blinded them without the sonar. They relied only on their few visual sightings in the vast ocean surrounding them. As the sun set in Monterey Bay, the Ocean Explorer crew found themselves in an uneasy dance with one of the ocean's greatest predators. The crew of the Ocean Explorer's exploration mission had become a desperate battle for survival as they attempted to avoid angering the Orca. The Abyssal Phantasm, however, wasn't ready to let the intruders go so quickly. Laura stood on deck and scanned the darkness illuminated by only the dim running lights of the ship. Orcas were now a ghostly sight, only seen occasionally when they surfaced and blew mist from their blowholes into the cold, icy air. Captain Reed spoke to his crew in a low voice while firmly holding the wheel, instructing them to keep the engines low. He was intent on not provoking the situation further. Dr. Mark Thompson and the rest of the science team gathered in the laboratory below deck, where maps were spread out on the table. They were searching for underwater features that might discourage the Orca's pursuit. Mark pointed to an inlet near the coast on the map and suggested that the Orca might back off if they moved closer to the shallower areas. It was decided to change course. As the ship moved slowly towards shallower water, tension was palpable. As they waited for the Orca to follow, every minute felt like an eternity. Laura, who was keeping watch, pointed suddenly towards the stern. The Orca appeared again, but its behavior was different. It did not charge, but swam parallel to the ship. The large eye was visible above the surface of the water. Orcas are a constant reminder that the deep sea is unpredictable and wild. They should not be taken lightly. As the ship moved to shallower water, encounters with Abyssal Phantasm became less frequent. The depth of water may be something it wanted to avoid crossing. The silhouette of the coastline became visible with the dawn's first light. The crew was exhausted but vigilant as they prepared to dock. The Orca had been missing for a while, so it was hoped it had finally decided to retreat into deeper waters. As the ship docked, it was then that the events of the previous night began to sink into the crew. The Orca's mighty presence was evident on the hull. Captain Reed and the crew briefed local authorities and started discussions about the implications of the experience for future research. Laura and Mark shared their story with other marine scientists and presented their collected data. Understanding the Abyssal Phantasm's behavior was essential to manage future encounters safely. It was a big deal in the community, and there were plans to thoroughly study the area while respecting the boundaries set by the wildlife. The Ocean Explorer experience reminded those aboard of the delicate balance between the human desire to know and the sacredness of nature. The ocean is not a mere subject for study, but a living, breathing entity that deserves respect and consideration. They had learned a valuable lesson from the mysterious abyssal phantasm, a mysterious protector of the deep. As they left, memories of those hours of tension at sea, a story of human endeavor and the untamed spirit of the ocean, lingered. Aquapolis is a futuristic underwater colony nestled in the Caribbean Sea. It was a place of scientific advancement and advanced aquatic engineering. Scientists, engineers, and families lived in harmony with the ocean in this colony, a marvel of technology. Aquapolis hosted a highly secretive military research facility where top scientists were engaged in developing genetic modifications for marine animals aimed at enhancing their defense capabilities. One of their primary subjects, an orca referred to as Subject Delta within the project, was notably unique. This particular orca had undergone enhancements that significantly boosted its intelligence to levels comparable to humans. It had been trained to perform complex tasks and strategic operations, setting it apart from other marine creatures in their studies. Despite extensive security measures, the containment facility at Aquapolis had vulnerabilities. Subject Delta, the orca with enhanced intelligence and growing awareness of its confinement, identified a weak point in its enclosure. With a powerful strike of its tail, it shattered the barrier, causing the facility to flood with seawater. This breach allowed Subject Delta to escape into the open sea. The breach at Aquapolis triggered immediate chaos throughout the colony. Alarms blared, transforming the once peaceful habitat into a zone of panic. The security team, led by Commander Sarah Jennings, sprang into action. Amidst the turmoil, they worked diligently to assess the situation, coordinating efforts to contain the breach and mitigate any further risks to the colony and its inhabitants. As Subject Delta swam among the structures of Aquapolis, it began launching attacks on the colony's infrastructure. The striking black and white form of Subject Delta stood out against the backdrop of bioluminescent plants that adorned the underwater colony. Its first deliberate target was a critical power supply unit near the residential area. By ramming into it, Subject Delta caused blackouts across various sections of the colony, disrupting the normalcy and safety of the habitat. Life support systems started to fail without power, and residents found themselves in desperate situations. Residents were directed to safe zones, and emergency protocols were implemented. Dr. Emily Stanton, one of the foremost marine biologists opposed to militarizing marine life, realized the severity of the threat. The security officers, equipped with submersible vehicles and specialized equipment, tried to intercept the orca. Subject Delta used aggressive tactics to avoid capture. It darted through the colony's buildings, taking advantage of the complexity. The residents of Aquapolis watched as the chase went on, their homes becoming a battlefield. The tension in the colony was palpable. Every crash and thud echoing through its corridors reminded the residents of the danger outside. Recognizing the need for a new strategy, Commander Jennings coordinated efforts from the control center. Understanding that Subject Delta was intelligent and familiar with their tactics, she knew they needed a more thoughtful approach rather than merely trying to outmaneuver it. In the meantime, Dr. Stanton and other scientists gathered to discuss the possible causes behind Subject Delta's behavior, noting that it was not only attempting to escape, but also acting out in opposition to their actions, with its instincts distorted by their experiments. The Caribbean Sea's inky blackness became a spooky backdrop to the drama unfolding as night fell around Aquapolis. Sarah Jennings, the commander of the command center, formulated a plan requiring precision and courage. She informed her team that they should lead the creature into open water and away from the colony. She explained that they could use a sedative to calm the animal once there, but they needed to get it to come with them without causing more damage. The team used a series of low-frequency sound pulses coming from a submersible decoy to lure Subject Delta. These were similar to the sounds that initially agitated it. The submersible would be remotely operated to guide Subject Delta towards a trap area, where the water is deeper, and sedatives could be administered safely. Emily Stanton knew that despite her concerns about the ethics of the situation, this was their best chance to stop Subject Delta without causing it any harm. Her expertise in marine behavior was crucial to the mission's success. Subject Delta followed the sound of the first pulses from the decoy submarine cautiously but curiously. Residents gathered in safe zones around monitors and watched the unfolding of the operation with great anxiety. Each meter Subject Delta moved away from their homes was met with a collective sigh. As they waited for the outcome, the tension was palpable, a mix of fear and hope present. The trap was placed in deeper water. Following the decoy into the designated area, Subject Delta entered. The team deployed the sedative at the command of Commander Jennings. As the chemicals dispersed in the water, the giant orca began to calm down. It took several hours to sedate Subject Delta, but it was still alive. Dr. Stanton confirmed its stability by monitoring the orca's vital signs. She told the team that it was over, with a mixture of relief and sadness. Aquapolis's people reflected on the events in the aftermath. Slowly, the colony returned to normality. However, these events left a lasting impression on its collective consciousness. The breach was repaired in the containment unit, and new safety protocols were implemented to avoid future incidents. Commander Jennings, Dr. Stanton, and others reviewed the colony's practices to advocate for a more humane treatment of genetically modified marine animals. The incident with Subject Delta opened up a broader discussion on the ethical implications of using such creatures for military purposes. Subject Delta was moved to a facility, allowing it to live in peace without danger to humans. Its story became a case study in marine biology programs worldwide. The encounter with Subject Delta marked a turning point for the residents of Aquapolis. They had survived a deadly cat-and-mouse game, but their lessons would shape the future of this underwater utopia. Now more than ever, they knew their survival depended on their technology and ability to coexist peacefully in the ocean with its inhabitants. A change occurred beneath the surface of the calm waters of the Gulf of California. This disruption of harmony in the marine environment shocked the system. Orcas are majestic creatures that usually inhabit colder waters. However, they were far away from their habitat. The seafloor had been shifted by a massive earthquake, causing anomalies in temperature and water currents. This led the orcas astray on their migration. The first person to notice the confused pod was Dr. Mia Alvarez. She is a marine scientist visiting the area to study climate change's impact on aquatic life. Orcas are known for complex social structures and rely on specific migration routes. They were visibly distressed. They were not suited to the Gulf's warm waters, nor did they have the needed food. The community was already wary when the first incident occurred. Local fishermen encountered several orcas while returning from a late evening fishing trip. Without warning, the orcas surrounded their boat, sleek black and white bodies cutting through the water with alarming speed. One of the fishermen, Carlos, watched in horror as an orca rammed the side of their tiny vessel, tilting it dangerously. The fisherman managed to escape, but the event began a series of dangerous encounters that intensified their fear and anger toward these unfamiliar visitors. Orcas' condition grew worse as the days went by. They were used to eating fatty fish in colder waters, but found survival difficult in these unfamiliar waters. In their desperation, they began to act aggressively. This was a shocking change for an animal known for its intelligence and peaceful nature towards humans. Local fishermen started to report encounters. It became common to see boats returning from fishing trips with damaged nets or ripped ones. One particularly distressing morning, a small fishing boat capsized. Other fishermen barely saved its 2 crew members. The entire community was on edge. Not only were their livelihoods at risk, but also their lives. Dr. Alvarez decided to act after realizing the urgent nature of the situation. Orcas are intelligent and can learn and adapt quickly. She planned to use acoustic signals to mimic orcas' original habitat sounds to guide them back to the natural migration route. She worked with local authorities and other scientists to install underwater speakers on boats. The boats would move slowly northward towards colder water and broadcast the sounds to try and lead the orcas out of the Gulf. Initial tests in controlled environments showed promising results, but doing it in open waters with a wild pod posed a different challenge. The community watched the operation with anticipation. The boats formed a sound corridor extending into the colder, deeper parts of the Pacific to redirect orcas. Dr. Alvarez monitored the orcas' responses from a leading boat and adjusted frequencies and sound patterns to attract their interest. The first day was a slow one. Orcas were curious about the boat sounds, but cautious of them. Dr. Alvarez's team spent the night refining the approach to show that it can influence orcas without resorting to more invasive techniques. The orcas started to follow the sound path more confidently by the second day. Dr. Alvarez closely observed their behavior, noting signs of comfort in the colder waters. The journey was slow and tense, but as each mile northward passed, hope grew for these majestic creatures to be saved. As the operation progressed, the pod adapted to the acoustic guidance. Yet each deviation from the course became a significant challenge, reflecting the unpredictable nature of the wild orca's responses. As Dr. Mia Alvarez observed the pod of orcas adapting to the direction of the acoustic signal, she felt cautious optimism. As they moved further north, the waters cooled down and became more suitable for orcas. They were also closer to their diet. The marine biologist, her team, and the local fishing community continued pushing further into the Pacific. The journey was long. Orcas showed signs of adaptation but occasionally wandered, perhaps confused by other sounds or distracted by residual warmth currents. Each deviation was a challenge and tested the patience and determination of all involved. Dr. Alvarez fine-tuned the acoustic frequency to mimic orca communication in the wild. Meanwhile, back in the Gulf, the fishermen convened to discuss their experiences. Jose, a seasoned fisherman, expressed his initial resentment and growing understanding of the orca's plight, acknowledging that the creatures were as many victims of circumstance as they were. In the Gulf of California, the locals watched and waited. Orcas had temporarily left the waters so the fishermen could venture out in peace. The attacks were stopped and the damaged boats were being repaired. The actual test would be whether orcas would continue on their new course after the operation ended. After several days at sea, the pod started to display behaviors that indicated they were approaching their habitat. The pod became more active and more often surface-breached. Dr. Alvarez viewed these behaviors as signs of positive ecological integration. She explained to her team that they were recognizing home. Her voice was a mixture of fatigue and relief. The plan's final phase began as the boats approached calmer waters containing orcas' natural food. Dr. Alvarez's team slowly reduced the volume of acoustic signals to wean the orcas from human guidance. The process was delicate, similar to taking off training wheels. Too abruptly, the orcas could lose their way, while too slowly they may become dependent on sound for guidance. As the sun began to set on what was hoped to be the final day of the operation, the orcas began to move away from the boats. They became aware of their newly found autonomy. The orcas swam quickly, diving profoundly and surfacing far away from the ships. It was bittersweet for Dr. Alvarez to see the creatures she had guided returning to their natural rhythm. The mission was successful, and the boats returned to the Gulf of California. Dr. Alvarez recorded the final observations and planned to share his findings and methods to prevent similar situations. Local fishermen welcomed the team back with gratitude. Their livelihoods were secure, and they had a renewed respect for their marine neighbors. Dr. Alvarez wrote her report in her temporary office detailing the journey and the emotional and scientific challenges they had overcome. The rescue saved the pod of orcas and strengthened the relationship between humans and animals in the vast ocean ecosystem. After the incident, the Gulf of California returned to its routine with a new alert system and enhanced monitoring procedures, which will help prevent future disruptions. With a heavy heart but a hopeful outlook, Dr. Alvarez left the area, bringing along the echo of the orca calls that had filled her days and nights in these turbulent waters.